students, today's agenda is to check homework. We'll be learning about synthetic division and you will be able to work on 3.4. Today, students will be able to divide polynomials by using synthetic division. And what is synthetic division? Synthetic division is when you're dividing a polynomial by a binomial with leading coefficients of 1. And when you're dividing and you get the quotient, if there is no remainder, what that means is that this will be a factor and the quotient will be another factor. So those two multiply will give you this answer. Okay, so what I would like to do right now is to do long division and then the synthetic so that you can see the difference between the two. So in the previous lesson, we learned that we can divide x cubed plus 4x squared minus 7x minus 10. We divided by x plus 1. We just look at the first term inside and outside. And so x cubed divided by x is equals to x squared. I put the answer right here and then start multiplying. Remember that the steps are to divide, which we just did. Then after we divide and get the answer, we multiply. Then after we multiply, the next step will be subtract. And finally bring down. And you repeat the process again. So now we divided, the next step is to multiply. And so x squared times x is x cubed. X squared times 1 is x squared. But remember that the next step is to subtract. What I prefer to do is just, instead of putting the negative in here and then multiplying, I just change the signs because negative times positive will be negative and negative times positive is negative. So I just say, oh, instead of putting the parentheses, I just put the first term is going to be negative and the second term will also be negative. It just changes sign. X cubed minus x cubed cancels. 4x squared minus x squared is 3x squared. The next step is to, after we subtract, we bring down. And so it's negative 7x. And we repeat the process again. So now divide this term by x. So it's 3x squared divided by x gives us 3x. And I put it right here. And now I multiply. 3x times x is 3x squared. 3x times 1 is 3x. But again, the next step is to subtract. Instead of just putting it outside, I prefer to change the signs from positive to negative, from positive to negative. Notice how I cross the other one out and put it bold because sometimes I might forget and we don't want to do that. This cancels and now I have negative 7x and negative 3x is negative 10x. Again, the next step is to bring down and start all over again. Now we divide negative 10x divided by x. The x cancels and I only have negative 10. I put it up here. And negative 10 times x is negative 10x. Negative 10 times 1 is negative 10. Again, the next step is to subtract. What does the subtraction do? It just changes the sign. Okay, from negative to positive. This cancels and now negative 10 and positive 10 cancels as well. So you end up with 0. Since this ends with 0, the remainder is 0. That means that these are two factors of this polynomial. Okay, so the answer will be x squared plus 3x minus 10. So why is this important? Well, when we are dividing, we have one of the factors and then we end up with another factor. From there, you can use the methods that we have learned of factoring so that we can find later on zeros to graph. We're not going to do the graphing in this video. It's actually the next video, but this is the first step to that process. Okay, so that was finding the answer by dividing with long division. Now, how would synthetic division look like? What we're going to do for synthetic division is, first of all, outside we're going to change the sign of whatever is being added or subtracted in here. Okay? And inside we're just going to put the coefficients and constant of each term. So since we don't have a coefficient in here, it's going to be 1, 4, -7, and -10. And we're going to leave a space in here, and I'll show you why. This, instead of putting it as +1, is going to be -1. And so the first coefficient, we're just going to bring it down. After you put the coefficients in here and change the sign in here, remember we changed sign. The next step is to bring down the first. You are going to be multiplying. Okay, so times by each one of the numbers that we get here. -1 times 1 is -1, and we put it in the next one. And then in here, we're going to add those two. Okay, so change the sign, multiply, and then in here we add. It's the third step. So 4 plus -1 is +3. We multiply again. -1 times 3 is -3. We add this and it's -10. We multiply again. -1 times -10 is +10. When we add -10 and +10 is 0, and that's my remainder. Okay, the last one will be my remainder. What do we do with the other ones? This will be the coefficient of x squared. So it's going to be 1 that we don't put, x squared. 3, since it's positive, we put plus 3x. -10, that one has no variable. And so if you notice, x squared plus 3x minus 10 is the same answer. So it's just a shorter way of getting to the answer without having to do all these steps. Something that I would like to just give us an extra, and it's because it's going to help us for the next lesson. Remember that if there is no remainder, that means that this is one of the factors, and you don't have to do this for your homework, but it's going to make it a lot easier once you do the next lesson. So if there is no remainder, that means that this is a factor and the answer is another factor. And you can just see that this has more factors, and you can use one of those like the diamond, or just factoring directly. 2 factors of -10, but when you subtract them equals 3, well, that will be 2 and 5, but one of them has to be negative and you have to subtract them. Since this is positive, that's the biggest sign, so that means that the other one is negative. Again, this is just extra, just factoring completely, basically. And for this one, since we have the 2 factors that multiply equals this, but added equals this, then you just open your 2 parentheses and put -2 plus 5. Those will be all my factors, which are going to help me find where x will meet. And that's even more steps, but that's in the next lesson. Again, in this lesson, all you have to do is synthetic division, find the answer, and that's it. Okay, for number 2, I'm going to use the same polynomial, but I'm getting as the divisor one of the other 2 factors. But now I'm just going to be using the synthetic division. Again, what we do is change the sign of this right here, this constant. It's -5. We put the coefficients of each one of the terms, so it's 1, 4, -7, and 10, including the constant. The next step is to just bring down this 1 in here and multiply. -5 times 1 is -5. We add this, and 4 and -5 is -1. We multiply. -5 times -1 is 5. We add, and I get -2. Negative 5 times negative 2 is positive 10. We add negative 10 plus 10 is 0. Again, the last one will always be my remainder. And for the other three, that's going to be part of my answer. Those are the coefficients and constant. So it's going to be 1x squared. We always go with the second one. Negative 1, but we don't put the 1. X without an exponent, and minus 2. That's all you have to do for the answer. Again, I want to show you the factoring part just as an extra. Because this is a 0, that means that x plus 5 is one of the factors. Another factor is x squared minus x minus 2. And we can now continue to factor this. We know that the two factors for 2 is 1 times 2. This is the sign of the biggest term, so that's going to be negative 2. We open our parentheses, and it's going to be x plus 1, x minus 2. And just bring this down. X plus 5. If you notice, because it's the same polynomial that I'm dividing in here, the number 1, it's going to be the same factors. X plus 1, x minus 2, and x plus 5. X plus 1, x minus 2, and x plus 5. The order is different, but that's okay. Okay? And again, you don't have to do this part, but it would be good to just make sure so that it's easier once we're working with, for the graph. Okay? So again, it's just changing the sign, putting the coefficients in here, bring down the first one, and then multiply, put the answer in here, and add them. Multiply, put the answer in here, and add this. Multiply, put the answer in here, and add this. Okay? Okay, for number 3, again, negative 5, not positive, negative, you change the sign. We write the coefficients, so 1, 3, negative 13, negative 15. Bring down the 1 and start multiplying. Negative 5 times 1, negative 5. We add them, and 3 minus 5 is negative 2. Negative 5 times negative 2 is positive 10. We add them, and we get negative 3. We multiply negative 5 times negative 3 is positive 15. We add them, and we get 0. This is the remainder. And what that means is that this and whatever we get will be 2 factors, okay? Because we have remainder 0. And so this will be 1x squared. We don't need to put the 1. Negative 2x and negative 3. Remember that we don't include the one with the exponent in here. So this will be my answer. Again, how would you factor that? Since this is a remainder 0, that means that x plus 5 is one of the factors. X squared minus 2x minus 3 will be the other factor. Two numbers that multiply equals negative 3, but when you add them, or in this case subtract them, equals negative 2. Well, it's 1 times 3, and because this is negative, that's the sign of the greater one. We open our parentheses and put x plus 1, x minus 3, and just bring down the divisor that they had given us, which means it's one of the factors. Again, this part you don't have to do it, but it's good to practice it for the graphs later on. Okay, for synthetic division, we mentioned that the leading coefficient has to be 1. So in this case, what I'm going to have to do is, again, if you recall, this is by solving, equaling it to 0. So you're going to subtract 3 from both sides. Before it was just negative 3, but it was because we didn't have a leading coefficient. So you get 2x equals negative 3. Divide both sides by 2. And so x is equals negative 3 halves. So that's going to be the number that goes outside. It's going to be in fraction form. Not only that, but since we're dividing this by 2, whatever this is the coefficient, we will do for each one of the coefficients as well. So 2 divided by 2 is 1. 1 divided by 2 is 1/2. 1 divided by 2, right? And negative 3 divided by 2 is negative 3/2. From there, the steps are going to be the same. This is a 1. Negative 3/2 times 1 is negative 3/2. I add them, or in this case subtract them, and I end up with negative 2/2, which is equals to negative 1. Then I multiply again. Negative times negative is positive, and 1 times 3/2 is 3/2. And negative 3/2 and positive 3/2 is 0. The last one we said that that's the remainder. And so now we have our answer. That means that these two are factors. And so this will go with x, 1x. Okay, remember that the first one, we don't put it. It's just the next one. So 1x. And then negative 1. So minus 1. So those are my two factors. Okay, because it ended in 0, that means that the answer of this division is also a factor as well as the divisor. That's all you have to do. But again, in this case, since the answer is already a binomial, that means that 2x plus 3 is one of the factors and x minus 1 is the other factor. We don't need to factor farther. Again, for your homework, you just use the synthetic division and this will be the answer. And as you can see, it gets a little messier when the leading coefficient is not 1, and maybe that's the moment when you might want to do long division instead of synthetic division if the leading coefficient is not a 1. Okay, when we don't have a coefficient in here, that means that we just do the opposite. And again, we're doing the same thing. We're equaling it to 0, but in this case, we don't need to do anything else than just change the sign. Why? Because if we're subtracting, we just cancel by adding, and 0 plus 1 is 1. So see, it just changes the sign. We put the 1 positive now outside. The coefficients and constant in here, so 2, 1, negative 3. Bring down the first one. 1 times 2, 2. Add those, and we get 3. 1 times 3, 3. Add those, and we get 0. This is the remainder. And since it's 0 again, that means that the two are factors, okay? So what's the answer? The answer is 2x. We don't use the x with the first one. It's just 2x plus 3. 2x plus 3. And so those are my two factors. We cannot factor anymore. Again, that's all you have to do for the answer, but if we can arrange them as factors, that will also be helpful for, again, the next lesson when we will be graphing. Okay? So you saw that synthetic division is a lot easier compared to long division. So when we're graphing, I recommend using this method if possible. And now with this, we end our lesson. If you can please give us a thumbs up, subscribe around here. This will be the link to the entire unit. Here you will find the next lesson. Now you're able to do 3.4 and have fun.